We're talking about Little Richard. I am everything. Woo! If you've not subscribed yet, we'd love to have you. This happens to be Documentary Tuesday, just totally randomly. We do a lot of documentaries here. I think not a lot of folks do. So if that's the kind of thing that you like, we would love to have you join us. We'd be honored to have you be a part of our community here. Alonso, what is the Little Richard documentary about?
Shut up! So this premiered at Sundance, won an award there. It is from director Lisa Cortes, and it's an examination of Little Richard as a cultural phenomenon who really does not often get his due as one of the main architects of rock and roll, somebody who was a real pioneer and who was doing it at a time when to be as outspokenly sexual and queer and black as he was to court danger. And he was so volatile and so he was so much for the culture to take that, like, Pat Boone had to re-record his songs for white people because Tutti Frutti, even when you change the lyrics to make it not be specifically about anal sex anymore, which it originally was still
I
just...
didn't know. Did you know that Tutti Frutti was about anal sex?
That was news to me as well. But yeah, no, but the thing I always remember, a friend of ours, Lori Pike, once said the genius of Madonna is that she's always the third person to do something. And Little Richard was the first. And as the first, I think, doesn't always get the credit that he deserves. And people think, oh, Elvis or, James Brown, or these people. But like, Little Richard was there first. Little Richard kind of discovered James Brown. Little Richard's guitarist was Jimi Hendrix at one point. So he really is the key to so much of rock and roll as it exists now. And this movie kind of gives him his due. And it also examines his own inner conflict as somebody who was raised in the evangelical church and living in 20th century America, being torn between like being openly gay, being part of the hedonism of rock and roll, but then like this terror of going to hell and turning his back on Jesus. And so you see him like swing back and forth, like Bob Dylan. He has a born again moment and only records gospel, So yeah, it's a fascinating life story, and one that, one of those classic, like, if this guy didn't exist, you would have to make him up.
Yeah, I found this fascinating as well. It's enormously entertaining. Just watching all the archival footage of his performances and his interviews, just enormously charismatic, just fun to watch, just a joy to watch, and just you can't take your eyes off of him. And then they had this really impressive array of interviews of everyone from like John Waters to Paul McCartney to Tom Jones,
Mick Jagger,
yeah,
Nona
Mick Jagger,
Hendricks.
like Mick Jagger saying that it didn't even occur to him until he saw Little Richard that you could use the whole stage that way, right? You think Mick Jagger was like sprung fully formed in this way, but you see that like, he saw Little Richard and saw, oh, I can do that. And then interviews with Paul McCartney and anecdotes about how like they were the opening act. The Beatles were the opening act for Little Richard, and how much
in Hamburg,
right, and how much they learned from him. And of course, like the Beatles did so many covers of so many R&B songs, but like Paul McCartney points to the influence here. And then the way that they take that down the line, another generation and another generation to like Lizzo and Harry Styles, right? Clearly
Bowie and Prince and Lil Nas X.
The Prince influence is obvious, right? But like when you put two and two together, realize, oh yeah, like Harry Styles feels comfortable being this flashy and flamboyant and wearing like something that is that sparkly and spangly because Little Richard did it first. Like, I do think this film does a great job of giving him his due, but it also is not totally worshipful of him. It would be really easy to just focus on him and what a magnetic performer he was and how important to the birth of rock and roll. But it does examine the contradictions, and it does present them side by side in ways that are complicated. He even acknowledges that at one point, after being fully who he is and then going back to the church, like, oh, that wasn't that profitable. So I've got to go back to being the flamboyant, super gay Little Richard that you know and loved in order to survive. And so there's a candor there that I found disarming.
And also in the way that he inspired all of these subsequent generations of musicians. The movie very, very intelligently sort of traces back like Sister Rosetta Tharpe and these gospel singers and this guy with a pompadour and this other guy with a pencil thin mustache, like all the pieces that he put together to create himself, and then in so doing all the subsequent performers that he inspired. But it really makes a case for the blackness and the queerness of rock and roll, which I think a lot of cultural observers tend to forget about. And so I love that the movie is so much about that and is a reminder to audiences that whatever their thought of where this comes from, where this music they love comes from, there is a sort of black queer source in the center of it all. And that's really exciting.
Yeah, that Pat Boone section was really painful. But yeah, I appreciated there are so many really thoughtful intellectuals in here who do put those pieces together and explain like how queer the South is and how it doesn't get enough credit for that. Like Richard was raised in Macon, Georgia. And must have been tough to be a very queer black kid at that time there. I think we now need the Sister Rosetta Tharpe movie. Where is that?
That would be great.
Badass,
yes,
right?
for sure. I think that is a story waiting to be told, and hopefully somebody is out there doing it.
Yes. What is your number on this?
I'm going to say an 8. This is a really exciting documentary, and I learned things, but it's thrilling, and the performance stuff is great. And it's just, I love a cultural examination that just ties all these different things together and brings you to this focal point that made them all happen. And that's what this movie does so well.
Yeah, I'll say 8.4. Little Richard, I Am Everything is in theaters, but it's also streaming and rentable. So go and find it and learn and dance